When the echo of the blade faded and Robespierre's body grew still beneath the shadow of the guillotine, a silence settled over Paris unlike anything the city had ever known. It was not the silence of peace, nor the silence of victory. It was the silence that follows a scream, the breath held after terror, the uneasy quiet of a nation realizing just how deep its wounds had to come. France had torn itself apart in the name of freedom. Now it had to decide what freedom truly meant. The people were tired of watching carts roll down the streets carrying the condemned, tired of trembling every time a knock sounded at the door, tired of the endless speeches, the endless accusations, the endless fear. They had dreamed of a better world, but instead found themselves standing in the ruins of the old one, surrounded by ashes and ghosts. In the aftermath of Robespierre's fall, the leaders who remained stepped carefully, as if afraid the floor might crumble under their feet. They formed a new government called the Directory, hoping to place a calmer, steadier hand on the nation. It was led by 5 men, each trying to balance order and liberty, authority and justice. But the trust of the people had been shattered again and again, and the Directory soon found itself struggling to hold the nation together. Outside Paris, the countryside groaned under the weight of years of chaos. Fields had been abandoned, trade had slowed to a whisper, families mourned loved ones lost in riots, revolts, or the relentless blade. And beyond the borders, foreign armies marched, determined to crush the revolution before its ideas could spread. War was no longer a rumor, it was a reality. France fought on multiple fronts, defending itself against nations that saw the revolution as a threat to every crowned head in Europe. But the French armies, however, were fierce and determined. They fought not for a king, but for a cause, for a nation. And among the generals rising through their ranks was a young man from Corsica, with a sharp mind, relentless ambition, and a talent for turning defeat into triumph. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon was unlike any leader France had seen in many years. He was not born into nobility. He did not inherit power. He earned it on the battlefield, where cannon smoke and chaos seemed to sharpen his focus. Soldiers admired him. Officers feared him. Politicians underestimated him at first. But with each triumph, the people began to feel something they had forgotten: hope.
Napoleon saw the opportunity clearly. He understood that France was exhausted and needed direction. And so, on a crisp November day, he made his move. With the support of soldiers and allies inside the government, Napoleon staged a swift, almost bloodless coup. The Directory fell, and a new government rose, the Consulate, with Napoleon as first consul, the most powerful man in France. Many welcomed him with relief. After years of terror, chaos, and instability, a strong hand on the wheel felt like salvation. But this moment, quiet and almost peaceful, marked the true end of the French Revolution. For the revolution had begun with the promise of breaking the chains of monarchy, of giving power to the people, of creating a nation built on liberty. Yet now, power was once again concentrated in the hands of a single man. The path from king to republic had curved back towards something that looked very much like monarchy, born not from bloodline, but ambition. Napoleon, however, was not content with simply ruling. He wanted greatness. He wanted glory. He wanted to restore France to the heights it had once dreamed of, perhaps even higher. Under his leadership, the country found stability. Laws were rewritten into what would become known as the Napoleonic Code, a system that influenced many nations for generations. Roads were improved, schools strengthened, and the economy steadied. For the first time in many years, people felt the ground beneath their feet begin to firm. But ambition is a fire that never sleeps. In the years that followed, Napoleon expanded his power, his army, and his legend. Victories across Europe brought him admiration at home and fear abroad. Crowds cheered his name, politicians bowed to his influence, and finally, in a moment that seemed to echo with the irony of history itself, Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of the French, not a king by birth, but a ruler by will. And so, in a strange twist, the revolution that had begun by tearing down the monarchy ended with the rise of another kind of monarch, one shaped not from bloodline, but by conquest. The people who had once marched on Versailles, shouting for the fall of kings, now filled cathedrals to watch a new ruler place a crown upon his own head. Yet the revolution had still changed something profound. Its ideas, liberty, equality, human rights, had taken root. They spread across Europe, igniting movements and inspiring people who had once bowed their heads to kings. Even as Napoleon marched across the continent, the ideals of the revolution marched with him. The age of absolute monarchy was dying, not just in France, but everywhere.
As the 19th century approached, France stood breathing heavily from its ordeal. The wounds of the revolution ran deep, but beneath them was a foundation built on new principles. The people would never forget the terror, but they would also never forget the dream. And that dream, battered but alive, would continue to shape their nation for centuries. In time, the French monarchy itself would be restored, then fall again, then rise again, only to fall once more. But each return was weaker, less secure, less accepted by the people. The age of unquestioned kingship was gone forever. The revolution had changed not only France, but the very idea of what a nation could be. And perhaps that is the true legacy of the revolution. Not the battles, not the executions, not even the rise of Napoleon, but the awakening of a people who realized they were not subjects, but citizens. People who discovered their voices could shape the future. People who learned that the world could be different, and that they had the right to demand it. When we look back at the day the kings fell, we see more than a story of violence and upheaval. We see the beginning of a new chapter in human history. A chapter where ordinary men and women dared to challenge the divine right of kings. A chapter where ideas triumphed over fear. A chapter where the world began to understand that justice belonged to all, not just to the privileged few. The fall of the French monarchy was not the end of the story. It was the turning of a page, the beginning of a long, complicated journey toward democracy, rights, and representation. The road would twist and break many times. Mistakes would be made, blood would be spilled, but the direction of history had shifted forever. The Palace of Versailles still stands today, its halls filled with mirrors and memories. Tourists walk where nobles once danced, where kings once ruled, where whispers turned to chaos. But the power that once flowed through those rooms is gone. The gold remains, the art remains, the beauty remains. But the throne is empty. And that emptiness tells the real story. For centuries, a king had been the heart of France. His will was the law. His presence was the nation. But after the revolution, the heart of France was no longer a single man on a throne. It was the people, millions of voices, millions of dreams, millions of hands shaping their own destiny. That, more than anything, was the revolution's greatest victory. The day the kings fell was not the end of an age. It was the birth of a new one.